sleep. I mean, paid for a bhat ke, people are already ready for bed, I guess.
No, they're probably not because we already have people joining us. And once again, good evening and welcome to the show, to the fifth and the final session of Monon. It has been a deep pleasure, in fact, to have organized these sessions. It has been extremely helpful for many. We have been told because these times are difficult, they are unprecedented. We have not seen anything like this ever before in most of our lives. Uh, so the one thing that we had in our minds for a very long time before starting Monon was the fact that as much importance as physical health is getting right now, and rightfully so, equally important, equally challenging is mental health, because we have never been in such a situation. We don't know how to handle this. And if we live in a country where we are very, very scared and skeptical about speaking about mental health. So this evening, on our last session of Monon, is Ravina Di, and we are very happy to have her with us. It has been a long-awaited session, in fact. We have been planning this session for a very, very long time, and I remember having several conversations with her, discussions, deliberations on what the topic is going to be for this evening. And the one that we finalized is something that is very close to a lot of our hearts. So, isolation in human relationships is something that we are all facing a lot of challenges with, not just people who are affected by COVID, but also those who are not, because essentially we are all living in very, very isolated environments. Those of us who live alone are completely isolated from our friends, family, colleagues, and even for those of us who are at home with family, it is very difficult in the absence of people who we would like to meet, who we would like to interact with. So, good evening once again, and welcome to the show, Ravina Di. And thank you so much for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule for joining us today. Ravina Di is a trained psychologist and a counselor in one of the very renowned schools in Kolkata. She's also an independent psychologist who conducts sessions regularly. So, without further ado, without wasting any more time, I will hand over the stage to Ruvinadi. Thank you so much again.
Very good evening to all the viewers. Thank you once again, Shinjini, and thank you to the entire team at Edixa Magazine. Yes, this has been a show, rather, this has been a segment that has been long in the waiting. And I'm actually very happy to be here. Whatever I share comes from experience, comes from experience that was gathered over the past 2 years, because as Shinjini has highlighted, we haven't really experienced anything like this before. I had only one concern, which I was just talking to Shinjini about. It's 9:30, and after you've had dinner and you're all ready to for bed, I just hope I'm not the sleeping pill that cures your insomnia today. Because what I would like to do before I enter the presentation that I've prepared is tell you a story. I just hope it doesn't turn out to be a bedtime story. So let's start with a story which I found extremely poignant, and at the same time, I felt illustrates something that all of us have been struggling with. And just a little off track point, I will make the presentation in English, but I will not have a problem in answering your questions later on in English, Hindi, or Bangla. So please do not hesitate to send in your questions at the end of this presentation. So there was a farmer who adopted a motherless elephant foal, and he loved it a lot. But when he went into the fields to work during the day, he had to keep it tied to a pole firmly fixed into the ground, because obviously the little baby would wander off. And so the baby elephant didn't like it, and he tried hard to uproot the pole and escape. But the pole was made of iron, and it was firmly rooted into the ground, and so he couldn't escape. And finally, this little foal realized that he can't free himself, and so he stopped trying. Years passed by, and the elephant grew in strength and size, and It reached a point where he could have actually just given the pole a kick and escaped into the jungle. But all those years ago, in infancy, he had already learned that he could not free himself, and so he gave up trying. I chose this story because it illustrates Martin Seligman's concept of learned helplessness, an excellent starting point for our discussion today. Because it illustrates perfectly exactly how we feel on a daily basis. We often believe that the situation that we are in today is one that we cannot escape from. There is nothing we can do. We have lost control of the circumstances around us. So, like the baby elephant, we feel restless, helpless, and ultimately we resign ourselves to the situation and feel unhappy about it. So, it goes without saying that this is one of the many effects of isolation today. So let's now dive straight into the discussion. And if I could just have the presentation on screen, thank you so much, because I'll just need a little help. I will just indicate whenever the slide needs to be changed. I hope there's someone who could help me with that. Thank you. Um, let's first talk about the purpose of isolation. Why did we have the lockdown in the first place? Why were we all told categorically that we have to stay at home? Well, obviously, to check the rampant spread of the disease, social distancing was imperative. So we had to stay indoors to keep ourselves safe, to keep others safe, to reduce the numbers, to flatten the curve, which is all good. But what happened at the same time is that we eventually became prisoners in our own homes. And so we began to feel restless, disconnected, unhappy, emotionally distressed, personally alienated, and intensely lonely. So, in effect, isolation did two things. If we could just go to the next slide. Isolation did two things. It brought people together or it drove them apart. So, how has isolation affected relationships? Well, families now started living together 24 into 7. So, parents were at home all the time, working from home. Bedrooms became boardrooms and classrooms. Young people continue to study online. Work from home became a part of our vocabulary. Young adults left their work locations and returned home to stay with parents. Thank God for the internet because that allowed us to stay connected. And that was so important for us to maintain our mental health. And of course, there were increased opportunities for bonding, for building stronger family ties. You started having role reversals where dad would be helping in the kitchen while mom would be attending a meeting in her bedroom boardroom. And yes, thanks to social apps like Tinder and Bumble and OkCupid, relationships started blooming, friendships flourished online. And well, I could go on painting this very rosy picture in all the colors of the rainbow. But let's get real, right? It hasn't been all roses and rainbows for many of us. So living under the same roof, 24 into 7 into 365. Of course, we began to get on each other's nerves. And personal space being limited as it is, because most of us, and we're not only looking at the privileged, we're looking at every strata of society. Personal space was reduced to an absolute minimum, almost zero, especially if you have parents, grandparents, children living under the same roof. So while you as a student was trying very hard to follow a lecture on, let's say, financial statement analysis in your online management class, your younger brother or sister was busy learning his tables in another corner of the room, and your niece is singing Johnny, Johnny, yes, Papa at the top of her voice while running around the dining table, and your mother in the kitchen is shouting at the maid for putting the wrong spices in the aloo posto. I mean, who puts holud in aloo posto? But it's a circus where the clowns are running the show. But once again, this scene of domestic chaos is not as endearingly funny as I try to make it, right? Because what this situation also has done is create a lot of very deep seated psychological problems for a lot of people. How? There are homes where the virus is far from being the only scary entity around. And every home is not a safe space anymore. Because you do have people with absolutely no choice but to continue living with abusive partners who may or may not also be alcoholic. You have children facing the wrath of violent parents, facing incest or daily molestation at the hands of family members, single breadwinners who've lost their jobs, families who within days have tragically lost near and dear ones, children who've lost parents, both parents due to the disease. What about people with special needs? Autistic individuals who anyway have a daily struggle to adjust to normal ways of life within quotes, and who are now having to adjust to the new normal. Children with special needs for whom online learning is no learning at all. So, yes, this pandemic has eroded and corroded the very fabric of life and relationships as we knew them. And more than the threat of COVID, as we psychologists and psychiatrists and mental health professionals are seeing on a daily basis, we are faced with the ever increasing mental and emotional fallouts which the isolation has brought for all of us. Could we move to the next slide, please? And therefore, what are we actually looking at? We are looking at, or maybe have the next slide, please. We're looking at anxiety. We're looking at fear. Of course, fear. You're afraid of the virus. You're afraid of this tiny little thing which can enter your system and can lead to massive changes in your physical and mental makeup and may even lead to death. You're afraid of the virus. You're afraid of moving out of your house because of the virus. You're afraid of losing near and dear ones. You're afraid of losing your job. So, yes, you are suffering from anxiety, frustration, stress, loneliness, and that eventually leads you to this gradual descent on a very slippery slope towards depression. But before I go into a little discussion on depression, let me come back to what I want to focus a little bit on, the story that I started with, helplessness and a profound sense of loneliness. There was a point of time at which loneliness was a very stigmatized feeling. And so no one really talked about it. It wasn't the in thing to do. It's fine to say I'm having a panic attack. It's fine to say I'm depressed. But it's not fine to pick up the phone and call a friend and say, I'm lonely. You don't just do that. And it took a Theresa May to appoint a minister of loneliness in her cabinet to actually make all of us aware of the feeling of loneliness. And it is then that we collectively took a step forward to understand how necessary it was to talk about loneliness. And loneliness is not just a feeling, it's an experience. It's an experience that has emotional and cognitive dimensions. It is extremely painful and distressing. We do not consciously choose to be lonely, and we certainly do not enjoy it. Next slide, please. And when I say the word loneliness or lonely, it automatically allows you to visualize the next picture, which will be coming up on your screen in a little while. where you would visualize someone sitting on a beach or someone sitting all alone on a bench or somebody sitting by the window all alone. That's the picture that you visualize, right? But I would like to ask you another question or ask to visualize something else. Is it possible to be in a theater watching a movie surrounded by your friends, or be at a wild office party surrounded by colleagues, or even sitting at home watching the news with your loved ones, and yet to feel utterly, hopelessly alone? So, Dr. Ami Rokash, a very well known modern day clinical psychologist and researcher, in his book says, and I quote, the most painful loneliness is the one that we experience in an intimate relationship which has lost its zest, excitement, and intimacy. And this, unfortunately, is also one of the many effects of isolation, where people have undergone a change of perspective, a change of outlook, and maybe even a change of heart. Right? And this then brings me to another concept or phenomenon which isolation has created, that of loneliness anxiety. This is the anxiety that one feels when one thinks of being lonely. When you anticipate being lonely, you start feeling anxious. So I'll give you an example to make it easier to understand. Um, the victims or the survivors of the Holocaust experienced a depth of physical hunger that none of us can really comprehend. So, after these survivors escaped or were released from the concentration camps, even though they moved to other countries and they were very well settled, and some of them, most of them, became extremely wealthy, it was found that a lot of them were hoarding food which they later needed to even throw away because it started rotting. And yet they continued to hoard because they could never escape the overwhelming anxiety at the thought of having to face horrific hunger again. And today, what we are seeing is a similar loneliness anxiety, an anxiety that is brought on by the overwhelming thought of being alone or the fear of being alone. A fear that is brought on by the virus itself, the fear of illness, the fear of the death of loved ones, the fear of being physically distanced from a partner or somebody you love. And of course, you are surrounded by the endless frustration of being stuck at home, the anxiety of the times itself, all of which is precipitating this anxiety and then creating for many people today various psychological conditions like panic attacks, phobias, severe OCD, that's obsessive compulsive disorders, and yes, even depression. At this juncture, it's very important to underline the need to use and understand terminology correctly. When you are upset, if you are experiencing a low mood, or maybe you're crying, you feel like crying for no rhyme or reason, you're unable to sleep, you may be suffering from some form of anxiety, but no, you may not be depressed. So, aren't loneliness, low mood, depression all the same thing? Technically, no. Because it is possible for a person to feel depressed without actually being lonely. The difference lies in the experience of each phenomenon. So, a depressed person essentially wants to be left alone. They push others away from themselves. They retreat into a shell and they shun all forms of social interaction. Lonely people long for company and they need to feel close to others. And these differences in experience help us to differentiate between feeling lonely and being depressed. So, depression is a mental illness, a clinical condition which would possibly require psychiatric evaluation, psychological intervention, medication, even. However, loneliness cannot be addressed with medication or psychiatric intervention alone. And therein lies the difference. Which now brings me to the question of that I'm sure everyone is waiting to ask. If you're talking about all of these psychological impacts of the isolation on the individuals who cannot handle isolation during this pandemic era, then what do we do? How do we address this? Well, before we look at possible solutions, I think it's very important to first understand the concept of solitude. So can we just move to the next slide, please? And this idea of solitude is best exemplified by our Indian hermits and sadhus, who can live alone for years, but are neither lonely nor depressed. So solitude occurs when we welcome the state of aloneness. In such a state, we choose to be alone and we enjoy being alone. Writers, painters, artists, poets have often produced their finest works in solitude. I wandered lonely as a cloud, as Wordsworth so beautifully put it, right? So solitude is refreshing. It provides a respite from the demands of a fast-paced, technologically driven world, and it has many healing and beneficial effects. So keeping that in mind, let's go back to address the question, what can we do to mitigate the effects of isolation? Well, much has been said about this by people possibly more erudite than myself, and there are many things that I would possibly say that would sound cliched or repetitive. So I will try to put a very different and a personal spin to this. The first step in the right direction, I personally and professionally believe, would be to address this sense of helplessness. To do that, we first need to believe that we are and will always be in the driver's seat. I am the captain of my ship. I am in control, or I can be in control if I choose to. If we could please move to the next slide. So, embedded and immersed as we are in technology, the first step in taking control of our lives and mitigating the various effects of isolation would be the correct use of technology to stay informed. And I'll explain what I mean. Embedded and immersed as we are in all the gadgets that surround us, we can use it to our advantage to stay informed. Specifically, let's start by being correctly informed about the virus, about this pandemic, and about the resulting disease, COVID-19. How do we handle it if it infects us? Where do we go? What do we do? So use technology, which is at your disposal, to avail of information to create a checklist for yourself. What can be done in various situations if you or a family member becomes ill? Where do you go? Whom do you call? If you are in home isolation, how do you handle the problem? What medication would you possibly require? If you don't have access to food, how would you enable or how would others be able to reach you? Create support systems for yourself. And I'll tell you, this is not my own personal idea. This was something that was mentioned to me by a friend in Delhi who recently went through COVID himself. And he was admitted in hospital and obviously went through a harrowing time. But he came back safely to his family members. And the first thing that he thought of was, I have had a personal experience with this virus, with the disease. Let me share my experiences with others. And so here you have an individual who then sat down and has created a concrete document, which he is now sharing with friends and family online. And so that brings me back to the first point on your screen. Use information to get control back over your life. What does it do? Create support systems for yourself because it immediately addresses fear and anxiety. It reduces the sense of frustration and eventually will reduce the sense of helplessness as well. and you have therefore started on the road to handling the effects of this isolation. Consider another very common cause of loneliness, the lack of physical proximity. Let us be very clear about the fact that connectedness and intimacy is not necessarily linked with physical proximity alone. Take, for example, two people living under the same roof who can actively hate each other and who will probably come out of this pandemic with a divorce certificate. While you can also have two people in a long distance relationship investing care and concern to make things work. So let us not trivialize the value and the importance of online relationships, because in this current situation, it is actually working for many people. But before we revisit that point, let me encourage you to first start building a relationship with the most important person in your life, you yourself. Invest in yourself. By staying at home or working from home, you've actually been handed on a platter various opportunities to engage in self-care and self-improvement. And no, doing this does not make you a selfish or a self-centered person. If you are physically fit and healthy, if you are feeling a modicum of peace or happiness, then you bring that much more peace and happiness into your relationships. You are able to share that much more with others. It's like saying, it's only if you have a box of chocolates that you can share it with others, right? Unless you are a chocoholic like me, in which case you will not want to share. And that is selfishness. But coming back on a more serious note, unless you possess a sense of peace and positivity, you will not have enough within you to share with others. So invest in yourself, practice self-care, practice self-kindness. Give yourself a break, let your hair down, pamper yourself. Your bedroom does not only have to be a classroom or a boardroom. It could also be your salon or spa. And there are 100 do-it-yourself or more do-it-yourself videos that talk to you about how to give yourself a facial massage, how to give yourself a manicure, a pedicure. Pamper yourself. Involve other family members. I mean, who doesn't love a good foot massage? Right? The more the merrier. Pull out that old guitar or tanpura, which is lying in a corner of your room. Dust off the cobwebs. Or pull out the tabla that's lying in another corner of the room and being used as a coffee table. And get back in touch with music. Go back all those years ago to the time when Ma or Baba would be dragging you to a Ganer class or an Abriti class. Get back into the groove. Engage with music, with gusto. It doesn't matter if you sound like a crow in pain. You're not appearing on the Indian Idol show. You are just reconnecting with yourself and doing something that you loved. So search around inside there. Look for your talents and skills and start honing them again. As a teenager, did you love to sketch? Well, start again. Have you always wanted to learn a new language? Go ahead and download the Duolingo app. What's to stop you? But invest in yourself. Reconnect with yourself, invest in yourself. And then you will be ready to start putting together the building blocks for building relationships with others. And this is when you start investing in your relationship with others. You can cultivate a good contact or a good relationship with colleagues, with peers. Yes, get online and make new friends. Explore the concept of online dating if you want to. I mean, let's be honest. If that one message from a certain special someone in the morning, hi, how are you? If that is what actually gives you the motivation to get out of bed in the morning, then where is the harm in it? Provided you're staying safe. And I don't need to tell you how to do that. So stay active online, but with an express purpose of being informed, of sharing information, of staying connected with real people, of building real relationships, maybe even seeking entertainment. But beware of the pitfalls. Gadget addiction is a new age disease also, classified by the World Health Organization. So make sure that you are not using social apps to shut out flesh and blood human beings in favor of cartoon avatars and nameless, faceless online alter egos. The online world can actually be fun, but it is the real world where you exist and where your relationships exist. And it's those relationships that you are looking to build up on. And now I would go in the complete opposite direction and encourage you to, on a regular basis, do something a little different. Engage in digital detoxification. Shut off all gadgets and then ask yourself, what will I do now? Can I read? Can I paint? Can I sing? Can I go for a walk? Can I call up a friend or a couple of friends and let's go and play badminton or volleyball together, provided you maintain all the protocols of social distancing? Or you can simply meditate. Allow your senses to once again reconnect with the natural stimuli of the environment around you, rather than being bombarded constantly by audio-visual stimulation from the screens that surround us. And by investing in yourself and investing in others, you are now beginning to reach out. You are now beginning to very slowly mitigate some of the effects of isolation, loneliness, anxiety, fear. We're slowly bringing these down to a minimum just by doing these little things. Another thing that we should actively engage in are random acts of kindness by reaching out to others. Talk, people, talk. We have become expert speed texters, right? But look at our words. We've abbreviated them to alphabets. I mean, HBUWYD. Talk, communicate. If you are feeling sad or upset or lonely, reach out to a friend or a family member and talk about it. And keep yourself open to the option of actually allowing others to reach out to you if they need a shoulder to cry on. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So in these pandemic times, when isolation is now the watchword and social distancing is mandatory, how do we continue to maintain the social touch? So stay connected, be there for others, learn to listen. Listen not only to what is being said, but listen to what is possibly also not being said. And then, if you have access to such information, also be open to the option of seeking professional help if you feel that you are not equipped to help someone beyond a certain point. Learn where to draw the line. If there is a family member or a friend who appears to be a little out of sorts, reach out, try to communicate, offer assistance, but also be aware that there is only so much that you can do as a layperson who is also struggling with anxiety and stress on a daily basis. So if you think that the things are getting out of hand for yourself or for a friend or for a family member, then offer professional help. Then take a step backwards, because there is only so much that you can do. And finally, something that I personally have always believed, whether you believe in God or not, whether you are a spiritual person or not, it does not matter. At the end of every day, take a little bit of time out to offer up gratitude. Be thankful. Be grateful. Grateful that you are still alive. Grateful that you are still surrounded by the people you love. You have a roof over your head. You have food on the table. You have a job. You've not lost your job. You have not experienced a pay cut. Be grateful. Be grateful for the little things that make life worth living. And that brings me to the next slide, where I've put a little quote by a very well-known modern day author, Mandy Hale. And these are words that can give you immense strength in these times of isolation. And so I would like to bring my presentation to a close and revert back to Shinjini with a very big thank you, not only to the team at Elixir Magazine for giving me the opportunity to be here today and share my humble opinion and thoughts with you, But also to all of you, hopefully you enjoyed this session, and I think we are now open to taking questions. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for this wonderful session. Um I don't know about others, but I know that I needed it because there was so much of positivity in today's session that I felt for the first time in a very, very long time that I would actually have the energy to do something tomorrow. And that brings me to my first question. In fact, it was during the session that I received this question on my WhatsApp, and I've been requested to keep it anonymous. So I'm going to start from here and then take the pre registered questions later. Uh, what if I don't feel like doing any of those things throughout the entire duration of the day? And I think the sender of the question is referring to all the activities that you have suggested.
Absolutely, I understand that perfectly. And yes, there is no hard and fast rule that you have to do only what I told you to do. You can do anything which you feel will make you feel a little better. Anything at all. So maybe you need to think of what you would like to do. And I'm sure you'll come back with the next question saying, what if I don't want to do anything? Well, that would ring a little bell in my mind because it might then indicate that you are beginning to lose interest in various activities of daily living, even lose interest in things which in pre-pandemic times possibly gave you a lot of happiness and joy, in which case I would wonder whether you are already on the slippery slope. So, two suggestions. Do a little bit of soul searching. Try to find the cause, the pandemic in itself, the virus in itself, the fear of being ill, the fear of being lonely. What is the reason behind your feeling so disinterested, so unmotivated? Why do you not feel like getting out of bed in the morning? Why do you feel like just sitting crouched in one corner of your room or just lazing about on your sofa all day? Why do you feel that way? Try and put your finger on the cause. And it might just help if you reach out to someone who is professionally qualified. It might help you. It's a few sessions. It does not necessarily mean that you are suffering from a mental disease of any sort. It might just be that you are stuck in the eye of the storm and that is preventing you from looking at the larger picture. So it might just help if you seek professional help as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Most of the questions are in fact anonymous ones, so I'm going to skip the ordeal of taking up names altogether. So the first question is, and these are the pre-registered ones. I'm sure we are getting more questions on the live stream, so I'll be happy to entertain them once the pre-registered ones are answered. The first one says, OCD is making my friend claustrophobic, which in turn is making me feel the same. Also, he's trying to force his doings on his friends and family. How do I help him as well as myself?
Well, if you are using terms like OCD and claustrophobia, then we're already talking about confirmed clinical conditions. So I think this is an individual who desperately, definitely requires professional help. And that would be the first step in the right direction. Encourage your friend to seek help online. It's not necessary in this day and age to just visit a doctor's chamber. It's not needed either. Get online, find a good psychiatrist. We have a number of very, very good psychiatrists in the city, and you have a whole plethora of psychologists who are available online as well. Please seek professional help.
The second question is, not everyone can afford to visit a psychiatrist or a counselor. How can they seek help?
Oh, I agree. I agree. When we are living in a time of lockdown where people have probably lost their jobs and then facing depression, I cannot expect someone to pay me for an online counseling session. And yes, to answer that question, there are a number of free online counseling services available. Um, there are a group of psychologists and special educators that have come together to form an online counseling helpline called Dhrubotara. Please check them out. Whatever I'm mentioning right now, for paucity of time, I'm unable to give you phone numbers or contact numbers, but all of the organizations that I'm talking about have their contact numbers available online. So please check online. You can look for Dhrubotara. You can look for a website called opencounseling.com. It provides you with all the active online counseling centers right across India. Any of the chief metro cities and even some of the townships. Each of them have a counseling center which is registered with opencounseling.com for children in distress. Any kind of distress where children are involved, please use the 1098 Pan India helpline. The Rehabilitation Council of India, please check their website. They have multiple online counseling services. West Bengal government has started a number of online counseling services. You also have certain organizations like Don Bosco's Nitika. They have free counseling services that are available. For those of you who are on Instagram, you could choose to follow Faye D'Souza. She regularly updates with a number of online helplines, telecounseling networks, free aid, where to find, what to find, if you need oxygen concentrators, if you need cylinders, if there are organizations that are taken in children who are orphaned in this pandemic. So there are a number of helplines and counseling centers that are available online. Please go online, get a phone number, get yourself some kind of psychological intervention.
I was just looking at the third question while you were talking, and I think this is a very, very serious one. A friend of mine is suicidal, and I do not know how to be of help. Making the family understand about how seeking help is necessary might take a toll on him, and how am I supposed to help?
I understand. Now, once again, this is an individual who, once again, is asking for professional help. But when we are looking at depression and its concomitant suicidal component, it is best not to leave this unattended for too long. And it is also advisable not to leave the family members out of the picture. So if you are a close friend and if you are aware of the family setup, try and identify one supportive family member within the circle that surrounds the person we are talking about, and explain things to that particular individual and ask that individual to then speak on behalf of the person who is facing this situation to the other family members, so that eventually what you are doing is creating immediately a support system around this individual, whether he wants it or not. If you find that the family has firmly shut its doors, which may or may not be the case, then reach out to other friends. But make sure that you are not the only one who knows about the situation. Make sure that there is a strong support system surrounding this individual, and then immediately seek professional help. With the consent of this friend of yours, please, you may go a little out of your way. As I said, learn where to draw the line, but there are some times where you can get a little more involved, especially with close friends. Make an appointment with a doctor. You can even be present in the online counseling session or psychiatric session if your friend wishes you to be there. So, create a support system, reach out to a supportive family member, but immediately provide or aid in the provision of professional help.
I think a lot of these questions focus on how difficult, firstly, it is to get professional help in terms of finances, and also because of the family setup, or maybe how people are going to react around you. So, I have heard this from a lot of my friends, and in the last few sessions that we have conducted, that somebody needs professional help, but the friend is saying that if I contact the family, there is going to be a lot of reactions from the family. Either they are going to say that no, you're exaggerating the matter, or this is not even a issue of concern anymore. So what are you even talking about? So how do you think we
Absolutely.
could get around this? Is there a way out?
Communication and more communication. We need to consistently talk to people and explain to them that depression is a clinical condition, that the person is actually suffering. Yes, I know. If you look at the larger picture, at the large numbers of people who are dying because of COVID, the people who are thronging to the hospitals, people losing their jobs, children losing parents. I mean, there's so much of chaos and there's so much of misery and sorrow in the world around us that sometimes people tend to trivialize the personal sorrows and miseries that people may be undergoing. But let's not trivialize it. So I think here communication is very important, because if you can somehow convince even one member of the family that what the person is going through is real, then that would go a long way in building a support system. Having said that, I have also said that there are families where the door is firmly shut. There are families where psychological problems or psychiatric illnesses do not exist. They refuse to believe it, because going to anyone for psychiatric help is a strict no no. It's still a taboo in the Indian society. You'd rather, I mean, it's a very sad and tragic thing to say, but I'd rather talk about having cancer than talking about having a mental disease. And that is the tragedy of our times, that we are so advanced at so many different levels and we still don't want to talk about mental illness. But having said that, that in itself is one of the ways forward. Keep talking about it, communicate.
Absolutely. I have also heard a lot of people say during the pandemic that I think it's a matter of privilege to be talking about mental health because so many people are suffering. So many people are not getting food, basic shelter. So I know that I have a roof over my head and I'm still feeling sad and lonely. So I'm just, acting like a brat, I think is the ideal word to go with here.
Yes.
So again,
Yes.
so that is self-blame, and they are not willing to come to terms with the fact that they are feeling sad, that they are not feeling okay.
This may actually
So
be one
again,
of the reasons why they don't want to talk about it also.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There have been some questions which have been posted on the live stream, so I'll just take the live questions first and then come back to the pre-registered ones so that we don't lose them in the flow. There is a question from Adarsh. Not everyone can afford to visit a psychologist or a counselor. Okay, we've already answered this. The other question is from Lisa. In this pandemic era, we are all busy with our online classes and have only the virtual means of communication at hand. So how much of screen time is actually affecting our sleep cycle, and how shall we deal with that given the necessity of attending the classes and also keeping in touch with our loved ones in such hard times?
I agree, and I perfectly concur with what Lisa has to say. But simultaneously, what I will say is what I've already said: digital detox. I am sure we don't need to attend classes every day of the week, including weekends. How about now? Right. We are also bombarding you with audio visual stimulation late at night. However, having said that, I hope it is beneficial to you in the long run. But how about just switching off your all of your gadgets from, let's say, 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night? How about then listening to some music or reading a book or just taking a walk on the terrace? You don't need to go out of the house, right? Or just go and sit around the dining table, have dinner together, and talk about anything under the sun, right? So there are many things that we can choose to do which do not involve our cell phones or laptops or screen time. And let's start looking at those things again. I would even tell you something as inane and silly as play a game of Ludo, and I'm not talking about online Ludo, right? Go back to the games of childhood: Ludo, caroms, snakes and ladders. It's so much fun. And no, it is not depressing, but it is quite disappointing when you end at the bottom of a snake when you're almost reaching number 100, right? Sounds silly, sounds childish, but on occasion, and this is part of self-care and reconnecting with that inner self, sometimes just reconnect with the inner child.
I'll just very quickly take the rest of the questions that we have with us before winding up the session for today. Not getting any motivation in any kind of work, almost doing everything for last 1 almost doing nothing, I think is what she meant, for last 1.5 hours, how to get over it.
Oh dear. Once again, something that I mentioned just a little while ago in response to another question, I think it's very important for you to look for the cause of your growing disinterest and lack of motivation. Look for the cause. The cause has to be there within your immediate environment, within the family, maybe, or within your social setups. Look for the cause and try to address that first. Um, Take a break. Give yourself a break if it's possible. It's not mentioned whether it's a student or whether it's a young adult who's just starting out on their careers or someone who's into higher education. It's not very clear as to who the individual is, but whoever you may be, take a break if it's possible. Do engage in anything which would constitute self-care, being kind to yourself. And if you find that you continue to feel like this for the next couple of days as well, consider that you might actually be suffering from chronic stress or a physical or mental burnout. In which case, it might actually help for you to see a psychiatrist, or if you don't want to look at medical intervention immediately, reach out to any one of the free online counseling helplines or organizations and talk to someone online. Talk to someone online, try and identify the cause. Because once you have the cause, it's easy to find the cure or the solution. But if you don't understand where this is coming from, you'll continue to feel this.
Absolutely. The second last question is a very general one, but and you've already touched upon this, but in case you would still like to elaborate, how is social distancing affecting relationships, short distance within bracket, and the innate equation between two people?
Oh yes, absolutely. It some parts of it has already been addressed. Yes, but I would like to reiterate that you possibly need to relook at your relationship. Are relationships based on physical intimacy alone? I know we live. I mean, we are not living in the dark ages when even holding hands was taboo, right? So I think a major part of the romantic relationships that people engage in today are focused on physical proximity and physical intimacy. Now, when you take that out of the equation, what do you have left? What you should ideally have left is also extremely valuable. There should be trust, friendship, care, concern, humor, right? So, if you take away physical intimacy and physical proximity and then analyze what do you have left, if you are left with a sum total of 0, then where is the relationship that you're talking about? So then you need to relook at the entire equation that you're talking about, right? But if this is a relationship where you feel the stirrings of commitment, and if you feel that this is something that you would really like to invest in, then physical intimacy and physical proximity should not be a problem. Long distance or short distance, doesn't matter. Because you are looking at so much more which that relationship has to offer you beyond just, not being able to kiss your partner.
Absolutely, yeah. The last question is, there is already so much going on in each of our lives that it's difficult to understand what our partners are trying to convey from another different household and situation. This is leading to irritability and lack of understanding at both ends. Is there a way to circumvent this?
Well, once again, I think my earlier answer answered part of this question as well, right? If you take physical intimacy out of the equation, if you take closeness, physical closeness and physical proximity out of the equation, then what do you have left? But to build on what I said, why not relook at what brought you together in the first place? Did you click? Why did you click? Build on that. Try to engage in a meaningful conversation with your significant other. And as I said before, be patient, learn to listen to what is being said and also what is being left unsaid. Sometimes we project our feelings onto others, and sometimes we also displace our feelings onto others. Sometimes we use the significant other as a dustbin or a doormat or a punching bag, right? So we need to revisit the relationship, understand why it started, What was it that attracted us to each other in the first place? Try and understand what is it that each of us is bringing to the relationship, and what is it that we can continue to share. Answer the question as to whether you actually want to continue to share or not. And slightly off track, but we all know that a man who's angry with his boss will go home and kick his cat or shout at his child. We're talking about displacement. Is that what the other is doing, or is that what you are doing? Are you displacing your frustrations and anxiety from one situation or relationship onto your other relationship? So look at all of these factors, sit and talk to each other. Once again, we're talking about communication. Learn to listen, be patient, and see whether you can ride the wave and come out onto the other side with something that is stronger, with something that is meant to last.
That is a beautiful note to end the session on. And thank you so much. Once again, I cannot thank you enough for taking so much time out, so much of effort goes into each one of these sessions, and a lovely presentation, a lovely discussion, in fact, and a very, very positive note to end the session on today. So thank you so much once again. Thank you to all the members of the audience for bearing with us this late at night. And we were having a lot of technical glitches at the beginning, so we were late in joining, but thank you so much for bearing with us throughout the 5 sessions of Monon. We have been very, very happy with the response, and we definitely hope to come back sometime soon with more of these sessions. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you and good night.